So, first, just everybody can figure out on Georgia View where to get things like the syllabus and the assignments, right? Clearly marked here, syllabus and assignments. Now, the Georgia View reader tends to do funny things to text that you upload to it, so it's usually a good idea to just download the syllabus or the assignment sheet. It will just make it easier to read. And put it into, if you put it into edit view, that makes that, then, okay, yes, everything is good and nice and legible. All right, so you don't really need to worry about reading the learning outcomes. Those are not really for you. Those are more for the accreditor so that we can keep giving you financial aid. What you do need to worry about here is my contact information. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Moyer. It is pronounced Moyer. My office hours are Monday and Wednesday. Oh, I need to go in and fix that. They assigned me a last-minute thing on Mondays and Wednesdays. I can't do those office hours anymore. My Monday, Wednesday office hours are now going to be 12 to 2. So I will go in and fix that after class, but just make a note of that, right? Monday and Wednesday I'm in the office from 12 to 2. Tuesdays and Thursdays I'm in the office from 11 to 1:30. My office, for those of you who don't know where it is across the hall. It's English 239. The best way to get in touch with me is to use this email address, right? michael.moyer@gsw.edu. Please do not try to contact me using the Georgia View email address. I don't check email in Georgia View. I really only check my campus mail. I don't like the interface in the Georgia View email system. So if you need to get in touch with me, contact me here. I will usually get back to you in like within 24 hours. If I can't, I will usually acknowledge that I received your message and say, look, I'll get back to you about this when I can. If it's urgent, make sure you let me know that it's urgent so that I know that I have to address this quickly. Right, what else? Did I tell you where my office is? Okay, good. I feel like there was something else that I meant to tell you here. Oh, right. So these are my officially mandated office hours, right? These are the times I have to be in the office. These are not the only times that I can be in the office, though. So if you can't meet with me within regular office hours, but you need to talk to me, feel free to schedule something else, right? I can be available outside of these office hours. But, you know, be reasonable, right? Like I'm not going to come at 6 in the morning, and I'm not going to come at 10 p.m., right? I do have a home to go to. Okay, so the required text for this course is the Norton Anthology of World Literature, 3rd edition, package 1. So it's 3 volumes, right? You can buy it as a single package. Volume 1, volume A looks like this. Volume B and C look slightly different from this. But you can buy them all as one box set. You can buy them in the bookstore. I don't really care if you buy them there or not, right? I don't care how you get it. I don't care where you get it, so long as you get it. Now, if for whatever reason you cannot acquire the course texts quickly, whether it's due to a cost issue or whatever, right? Let me know so that I can arrange some kind of temporary alternative, right? The key word being temporary. At some point, everybody's just going to have to get the textbooks, whether you buy them and share them with someone else or whatever, right? That's whether you rent them, whatever, right? Just make sure that eventually you get them, sooner rather than later. Okay. Other things that you need to know. Okay, how you are going to be graded. So there are going to be 2 exams. The midterm exam will be worth 10 points. Final exam will be worth 15 points. 2 papers. Midterm paper will be 1,000 to 1,500 words long, and it will be a close reading of a single text, right? No outside sources, just your own argument based on close observation of details in a single text, right? We'll talk more about what I expect from this when it gets a little closer to the due date. But just so you know, this is coming. The final paper is going to be 2,000 to 3,000 words long, and you're going to use at least 5 scholarly sources to make a researched argument about 2 course texts, right? One from the first half of the semester, one from the second half of the semester. So it's going to be a comparative argument. And by scholarly sources, by and large, I mean things that you get from our library, right? I'll talk more about the distinction between a scholarly source and a popular source, again, when we get closer to the due date. But yeah, if you have any, the assignments are actually all already posted in Georgia View. You're going to be doing a group presentation, which is worth 15 points, depending on how many people are still in the class as of Monday. You are going to be divided up into 6 groups of 5, and you will do a 25-minute presentation on an assigned topic, right? We'll explain how to do that when I assign the topics, but that's what this was about, right? That's what the sort of ranking of regions was about. That's what that's going to determine, is which project you end up working on. Participation is going to be worth 10% of your grade, 10 points. This doesn't sound like a whole lot, right? But remember, 10 points, this can make the difference between an A and a B, B and a C, C and a D, D and an F. So attendance is nice, right? I prefer that you be here than that you not be here. But I would like to see you here and active in some way, right? Now I know not everybody is comfortable speaking up in front of other people, right? That's okay. I would like to hear your voices. I would like you to speak up. I would like this to be a two-way conversation as much as possible. But if you are someone who is not comfortable talking in class, you can email me questions you have about the readings. You can come talk to me in my office, right? You can go to relevant events on campus, right? There are other ways to show that you are working and that you are interested if you are not a talker. So do those other things if you're not comfortable talking, and you'll still earn participation credit. You will also be writing weekly reflection papers. I'll explain those in a moment. And we'll be doing at least 10 reading quizzes over the course of the semester. So, those will be fairly basic. There'll be 4 questions on details in the text you were supposed to read for that particular day, right? This is a sort of honesty and accountability, and just do the fucking reading already kind of measure. All right, any questions about anything so far? We're good? We're clear? Okay. Right. Then on to the long and dull policy portion of the syllabus. Okay, so I do have an attendance policy, right? You are given 3 free days, 3 excused absences, for whatever reason not show up, right? You don't have to tell me why you weren't here. You don't have to bring me a doctor's note. Bringing me a doctor's note or some sort of explanation, right, is not going to get you more absences. You get 3. Think of them as like personal days or sick days at a job. Right? You're not going to get more of them, so make sure you use them sparingly. Now, if you do have some kind of long-term problem that is going to cause you to miss a good deal of class, then just come talk to me, right? Just let me know. And we'll see then sort of what the best solution is for you there, whether the best solution is for you to withdraw from the class or to, continue. Whatever. Essentially, I can't help you if I don't know what's going on, right? So if there's a family issue that's going to keep you out of class, a medical issue that's going to keep you out of class, anything like that, right? Just tell me about it. You don't have to go into gory details if you don't want to. But I am capable of being reasonable. Now, as somebody was mentioning at the beginning of class, I really, really hate lateness. Lateness just really, really irks me. It's distracting to everybody in the room, right? You know, somebody comes in late, the door is sticky, right? So it's loud, everybody looks up and stares at you, and you disrupt whatever's going on when you come in, right? Not only that, but you miss whatever the beginning of class is over. I start promptly at 9:30, right? 9:30, I'm just going to take off and go whether you're here or not. So it is better for you to be here. 3 tardies will equal 1 absence. So if you're someone who is habitually late, this is going to add up. Now, if you have some reason, again, why you are likely to be late frequently, then come talk to me about it. Disability services. If you have a disability that would entitle you to some accommodations, right? Whether it's a separate testing room or extra testing time or what have you, right? It's not me that you have to talk to about that. It's disability services. Their contact information is on here. What they'll do is send me a form. They'll tell me what accommodations you need and who you are, but they won't tell me what your disability is, right? I never have to know that. It's not my business, right? So if you do require any accommodations, if you have a diagnosed disability, get over to Evelyn Oliver at Student Support Services as quickly as possible so that we can get you the accommodations you need. How many of you have been to the Writing Center before? Okay, that's a good number. Does everybody know where it is? Yeah, it's in the ACE building right behind us here. So I do give extra credit on the midterm and final papers for students who go to the Writing Center with that assignment. Right, so if you go, you will get half a letter grades extra credit on that assignment, right? So your C plus gets bumped up to a B minus, your B minus gets bumped up, your B plus gets bumped up to an A minus, and so on and so forth, right? We all understand how numbers work in grades? Yes, good. All right. Already talked about cell phones. Now, as far as academic dishonesty is concerned here, right? Here's how I define academic dishonesty for the purposes of this class, right? Any work you turn in that is not your own, that you try to represent as your own, or that is not original to this class, right? That's academic dishonesty. So you cannot recycle papers that you've used for other classes. You cannot turn in work that is taken from another source that is uncited, right? One thing I'm going to say about buying papers. It is often easier to detect than you'd think. And the people who are selling them to you, like, seriously, they're ripping you off, right? The times that I've caught people with a bought paper, like, the bought papers, they've really been like absolute shit, right? It's clear the person who wrote the paper never actually read what they were writing about. So even if you didn't read the thing you're writing about, at least make it an honest failure, okay? So if you are caught doing any kind of academically dishonest behavior, penalty for first offense is a 0 on the assignment. Second offense, you automatically fail the class. No forgiveness after that, right? That's it. Okay, Title IX and sexual discrimination. This is a new policy we have to talk about because the state laws have changed. So if I witness any incident of sex discrimination, gender-based discrimination in this classroom, I have to report it to the university's Title IX coordinator. If you share with me any details of any sexual harassment or sex-based discrimination that you have encountered on campus, I have to share that with the Title IX coordinator. I cannot keep that in confidence, right? It's against the law for me to do that, right? I'm not saying, like, don't come to me for help if you feel like you need it, but know that if you do, and the issue that you need help with falls into this category, I'm going to have to report it. And that's true of all university employees. And we have another new state law that I'm actually not allowed to talk about. But the statement is on the syllabus. You can go to these, you can click these various web links to learn more about it. But I can't say anything about it. Essentially because if I give you any misinformation about what the bill does and doesn't cover, that opens me or the university up to a lawsuit. So it is the responsibility of the student to know what the law is. That's the way the law is framed, and to act accordingly. All right, any questions about policies? All right, then just brief word about the way the syllabus is put together. Now, most of you have already probably had a chance to look at this. If you were registered for the class more than about a week and a half ago, then you've already got a copy of the syllabus. But by and large, right, whatever is listed under homework, right, that's what I want you to read for next time. So for today, right, we're reviewing the syllabus and we're talking about these three texts. For next time, I want you to read the first half of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which we're then going to talk about on Monday, right? Any important dates or in the university calendar or other notes that are relevant to the class will be in this third column here, right? So I've noted here, right, that for now you're just using volume A of the anthology. That's the only one you have to bring to class right now. You don't have to lug around all three. The last day to add this class, if you've not yet done so, is the 17th, but everybody's actually registered, right? I think all of you were actually on the roster, so that's good. That doesn't always happen. If you intend to drop this class with it never having appeared on your record, right, you can just put this whole unpleasant, embarrassing episode behind you by the 21st. All right, does anybody have any questions about the syllabus at all?
How long would it take? How long does it usually take George to get access to the course if you registered, say, yesterday?
You should have access by tomorrow.
Okay. I mean, I had to check here.
Yeah, it's, you know, and you know, I can actually probably go in when I have my office hours and just add you. So I'll go and do that when class is over. Okay, so right, that's the syllabus. Other things I just want to quickly note. If we go back to our little table of contents here, I want to talk a little bit about these response papers that we're going to be doing. So 10 times over the course of the term, you're going to be required to submit a 500-page response paper by Friday. You'll have to do a total of 10 of these. You're going to select a pardon?
Did you say 500 page?
No, 500 word. Oh, I gotta fix that.
I look like
Yeah, by any standard, that's unreasonable. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's I'm sorry. That's a typo. Thank you for spotting that. Yeah, 500 word response paper. You're going to select a single short quotation from one of the texts you're reading for that week and provide a short analysis of some major theme, symbol, or idea in the text that you think your chosen quote is a good example of, right? So a couple of things you might want to think about while you're doing this. You should explain the meaning of particular details in the quote you select, like actually sort of close read it, dig into details. Okay, like why choose this word here, why use this particular phrase, that's good. But also make sure you're working with an idea that points to some bigger theme or idea in the text as a whole, instead of just sort of getting bogged down in details. Also, choose short quotations, right? The quotation doesn't count towards the 500 words. Your quote should be no shorter than a single sentence, no longer than a brief paragraph. If you want to compare a quote to other quotes in the text to demonstrate a pattern, that's also fine. Just make sure it's a, make sure it's a meaningful pattern. And again, you look for meaningful patterns of repetition and emphasis. Remember, not all repetition is meaningful. In a lot of these early epics we're going to look at, for example, there are certain formulaic phrases that are going to repeat that are not necessarily they don't necessarily mean anything, right? They don't necessarily point to any bigger idea. Recurring symbols, though, are probably important. It is also probably a good idea to look for meaningful patterns in the whole course, right? So if you see a quote in a text that seems similar to something we've seen before in the course, yes, do point that out, right? A lot of the texts have been chosen for specific thematic similarities, right? They talk about similar sorts of things. So it is absolutely a good idea to point those sorts of things out. Now, if you want to do more than 10 response papers, that's fine. What will happen is, like, the 11th will then replace the lowest grade you got in the previous 10. And so on and so forth. Provided you do better. You have to add that little caveat. You'll also get more participation points if you do more response papers than you actually have to. But yeah, just remember that by the end of the semester, you have to have done 10. Please do not wait till the end of the semester to start doing response papers. If you are sort of getting into an area where you're sort of moving a little too slowly on this, right, I will probably send you like a little cattle prod email, right? Hey, get on this. All right, any questions? Yes?
Do we have one date this Friday?
No, and again, it's like, there's no specific, like as long as you do 10, right, you don't have to do one every week, as long as you get 10 of them done. I mean, if you really want to do one for Friday, go for it, but you don't have to. Yes?
Do we turn them into you or on Georgia View?
They're on Georgia View. There are folders in the Georgia View Dropbox for 10 response papers. So if you're doing an extra one, then go to one of the response papers that you got a low grade on, go to the one you want to replace, and upload it there. Any other questions?
This is taking the place of this in-class writing thing?
This is taking the place of the in-class writings, yeah. This plus reading quizzes, yeah.
Oh.
How do you trivia on Georgia View?
Okay, I'll show you. If you go to assessments and assignments, right? No, maybe not assignments. Yes, assignments. Okay, it probably looks different actually from your point of view.
Is it like through Dropbox?
It is, yeah. There's a Dropbox. Let's see. Can I do a student view here? View a student. Right here we go. Okay. Then I can actually see what you see. So yeah, you will click on assignments, and you'll just submit whatever it is, whatever assignment it is you're trying to submit. And there are response paper slots numbered 1 to 10. Yes?
So we need to, do we type it in Word and then upload it as a file?
Exactly. That's exactly what you're going to do. Yes?
Do our files need to be like titled a certain way? Like, is there, okay, just like some
No.
teachers are like, oh, I want your student ID on the title and like what the assignment is and stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's already tied to your ID and everything in Georgia View. Like, I don't need any of that extra shit.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Yes?
For the papers, do you want an MLA format or APA?
MLA is preferred for this course.
Okay.
If you really want to do Chicago style, go for it, but MLA is easier. Anything else? No? All right, good. Then let's talk about myth. Okay. So, that's the bad marker again. You go away. Okay, so what's a myth?
Story.
Okay. Are we talking about any particular kind of
It
story?
explains something.
Okay, yeah, one theory of myth is that it's a sort of pre-scientific explanation, right, for a natural phenomenon. Right, it's an explanatory story. Good.
Teaches a lesson.
Yeah, another theory of myth is that a myth is a story designed to teach us something about human behavior, right? Or about human life, human attitudes. What else? Are these the only things that we use this word to cover?
Entertainment.
Okay, yeah, they were often used as entertainment, right? Myths were certainly woven into larger literary works, right? You know, the epics of Homer, for example. What do we usually associate the word myth with? Is myth, pardon?
Great.
Okay, yeah. We associate it with Greek culture, right, for one thing. Why do we associate it with the Greeks? Why do you associate it with the Greeks? Let me just ask that.
Because it's there's a lot of Greek mythology.
Okay, yeah. If you've been taught anything about mythology, right, you've probably been taught Greek mythology.
But I mean, there's myths.
Yeah, there's Roman too.
Mm-hmm.
There's myths that pertain to this day. All those urban legends you hear about.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's popular too.
Mhm.
So like, it's all pop culture it's pretty predominant. Even though Roman
Mhm.
mythology and Greek mythology is extremely closely related, most people don't know that they pretty much come from the same basis. So
Sure.
The
Because
Greeks
the
just happen to be
Romans
more popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one thing to note is that myth is not a force that is dead in the world, right? Myth is something, like, this is a way that we still think. This is still part of human behavior, right? There are, when we talk about myth, right, by and large what we're talking about is a kind of, narrative that serves as social glue, right? A kind of narrative that holds a culture together, that gives a culture definition. For example, how many of you have ever heard the term manifest destiny? Okay, cool, yeah, good. What does manifest destiny mean?
That was the one where it was the idea in early American history where we had the God-given right to the entire island of North America.
Right, now,
Probably the whole both Americas.
yeah, and not only that we had the right to it, but that we were gonna get it, right? That it was the destiny of the United States to expand from the Atlantic to the Pacific and swallow up everything in between, right? Now, is there any objective truth to this, that this was something that had to happen in the course of history?
Most island empires do expand to the full extent of the island. And
Sure.
We are an island empire.
Sure.
Well, kind of.
But this was also wrapped up with a number of specifically American religious ideas, right? And the myth of the frontier, right? Always, the American settler striking out and building his little sod hut in the middle of the Dakotas, right? So there was nothing objectively true about manifest destiny. Yes, it's likely because of the behavior of violent empires that would eventually happen.
Well, yeah,
But-
I mean, there was no guarantees, but it was,
Mm-hmm.
it was always going to be a thing, because that's just how new countries, new empires work. They always
Mm-hmm.
expand. But there was no guarantee that we were gonna reach California.
No. But yeah, this would be an example of a more contemporary kind of myth, right? Something that the majority of Americans believed that was not objectively true, that nonetheless provided some sort of shared cultural basis, right? Some sort of shared cultural environment.
There was a similar European idea too, but
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember.
You might be thinking of...
Because there's a term that I used to get mixed up with Manifest Destiny.
mhm.
And I know it was a European thing, but I just can't remember the name.
Well, there is what, and this is just a sort of side detour that we'll kind of end after this. But I think you might be thinking of what's called the Whig view of history, where there's the idea that history always advances, it always gets better, things always progress from era to era. That's also a myth, right? It's a myth of the Industrial Revolution that, okay, all the things that we're doing now, the machines that we're building, the factories we're building, all of this smoke that we're now spewing into the air, right? This is all for the good, right? Because things only get better. Humanity only progresses, never goes backward. That was also a myth that was kind of useful for people at that time to justify certain things they were doing. Myth is also, that's another theory of myth, that myth is not just a kind of social glue, but is also a kind of justification for behavior that already exists. I'm going to tell you a brief story. I'm probably going to lose most of you here. If you were already on the fence about this class, this is probably where you're going to jump over the fence and run away screaming. So in the later Roman Empire, there was a cult of priests called Galli. Gallus is the Latin word for rooster. So Galli is Gallus plural, roosters. Now, these priests worshipped a Middle Eastern goddess who had been imported into Rome named Cybele. They wore cosmetics and perfume, they grew their hair long, and they dressed androgynously. Once a year, on a day that was called the Dies Sanguinis, or Day of Blood, new initiates into the cult would take a whole lot of magic mushrooms and ritually castrate themselves. Now, this seems to us like completely inexplicable behavior, right? Like, why the hell would anybody do this? Right? Religious beliefs or not. Now, this particular activity was directly related to the central myth of this cult, right? So they worship this mother goddess, Cybele. Cybele had a eunuch consort, or, well, I guess more attendant than consort. A eunuch can't really be a consort, named Attis. And the way their myth went was that Attis was essentially a sort of chunk of Cybele that had been spun off of her when the world was created and was born from a pine cone. They regarded pine cones as sacred and used them in their rituals. And grew to be an exceptionally beautiful young man from that pine cone. Now, he was then sort of adopted by a king and all that, was going to be heir to a kingdom and have all the earthly power he wanted. He was engaged to be married to a neighboring princess, but on what was to be his wedding day, Cybele shows up looking for her missing part. Attis goes mad and immediately castrates himself. And then begins following Cybele around to sort of become part of the whole again. Right? This was their central myth. And so what they were doing was sort of in imitation of this particular myth. Now, one thing that myth theorists try to get at is whether the myth itself was the cause of the behavior, right? Whether they were doing this because of the story, or whether the story itself was made up to justify a practice that was already in place, right? Were people already doing this, and the story then arose later to explain it when they forgot the original reason? There are also, some people who will say that the myth would have sort of psychological explanations, right? That the goal of these priests is to try to reconcile the male and female parts of the personality, that sort of thing, right? And in fact, the myth would reflect that as well as the ritual. But yeah, when we're talking about myth, we are talking about something that is usually related to human behavior and human practices. Yes?
So were the Galli only males?
Yes. There were only men admitted into the cult.
Okay.
And Roman citizens were not permitted to enter into the cult. Foreigners living in Rome could enter the cult. But Roman citizens were not permitted to maim themselves in that way. Rome had a lot of funny rules, but was also, very permissive in other ways. So we'll get to that when we talk about Ovid a little later on. So when we talk about cosmogonic myth, though, we're talking about a particular subset of myths that have to do not just with human behavior, or certainly not exclusively with human behavior. Now, if any of you happen to read the introduction to today's readings, you will already know what cosmogony or cosmogonic myth is, right? What is it?
The creation.
Exactly. We're talking about myths about the birth of the universe, right? The creation of the universe. Anytime you see in a Greek-derived word these three letters, G-O-N, it refers to the birth of something. Birth or creation. And cosmos, universe. Yeah, so all three of these myths, all three of these sort of, the third set of readings isn't really myth, it's proto-science, but they're all concerned with the creation of the universe, right? Where does everything come from? How do human beings fit into the grand scheme of things? So I want to start by talking about the Enuma Elish. That's the earliest of the texts I had you read. This is the Babylonian creation myth. And early estimates place its origins in the 18th century BCE. Later estimates place it somewhere in the 12th century BCE. Right? Historians of the ancient Middle East are divided on exactly when it was written, but any way you slice it, right, this is very, very ancient stuff, right? This is very, very old. Now, I want to look at the very beginning of this myth, right? Tablet 1. Right. The origin of all things here, right? Page 34 in the anthology. When on high no name was given to heaven, nor below was the netherworld called by name, primeval Apsu was their progenitor, and matrix Tiamat was she who bore them all. They were mingling their waters together, no canebrake was intertwined, nor thicket matted close. When no gods at all had been brought forth, nor called by names, none destinies ordained, then were the gods formed within these two. So the first things that exist are these two beings, right? Apsu and Tiamat. Right? Apsu is the fresh water. Tiamat is the salt water. Apsu is male. Tiamat is female. This is actually sort of reversal of what we might expect from myth, right? We would probably expect the female principle to be the nurturing one, right? The one that nourishes life. But the fresh water is here regarded as male. Apsu is male, Tiamat, the salt water, is female. And all things have their origin in the mingling here of the fresh water and the salt water, right? So what is the primordial substance? What is the thing that all things are made of in the Babylonian scheme of things? Water. Yep. Water is the prime principle of creation. It's what was there before anything else was. And the mingling of different kinds of waters is what creates the gods, who then go on to do the work of creating the universe. Now, the excerpt we have in the anthology actually probably skips what is the most important part of the epic. Essentially, once the gods are born, Apsu is irritated by their noise. And so he decides that he's going to kill them all. So the gods band together, bind Apsu, kill him, and then sort of blood is released, sort of creating all of the freshwater ponds, right? Lakes, rivers. Tiamat, in vengeance for the death of her spouse, assumes the form of a monstrous dragon, attacks the gods herself, and is killed by Marduk. The youngest of the gods, who specifically represents the city of Babylon. Right? He is the god of the city of Babylon. And this is just sort of a quick thing to note. The way ancient polytheistic religions typically worked, each god's cult was centered in a different city. Right? So, for example, the god Enlil, the storm god, had his temple in the city of Nippur. The goddess Ishtar, who was the goddess of love and sexuality and also, paradoxically, war, had her temple in the city of Uruk. So on and so forth. The god Shamash, the sun god, and also the god of oaths, oath-taking and justice, had his cult center in the city of Larsa. So that city was deemed as sort of belonging to that god, and was supposed to be that god's home on Earth. So Marduk, the most powerful now of the gods, the god who killed the sea monster and used her bones to build the universe, right? Essentially, according to Babylonian belief, right, we're walking around on a dead dragon. Right, Marduk is now the most powerful of the gods, and so his city, Babylon, is now the most important of cities, right? The most powerful god gets the best city. Now, what does most of the excerpt we have from the Enuma Elish seem to consist of here, right? We get that bit about Apsu and Tiamat mingling, right? What comes after that in the excerpt that we've got?
The building of the piece of
Yeah, the building of the city, the building of the temple in the city, right? And the division of the gods into sky gods and underworld gods, right? It's like, okay, you gods go up there, you other gods go down there. So most of what we have in the rest of the myth is the establishment of civilization, right? Division of labor, building of civic buildings. Yeah, Corey.
Were heaven and hell divided at that point? Were like given a name?
Kind of, yeah. There wasn't really a heaven in the Mesopotamian belief system. There were gods who lived in the sky, right? But when people died, everybody went to the same place. There was one underworld, and it really didn't matter how good or bad you'd been, like everybody got the same treatment. One thing we'll notice as we read other ancient world myths, afterlife concepts tended to be pretty bleak. What you did, what happened to you in the afterlife mattered a hell of a lot less than what you did in the world above, right? Your reputation in the world above mattered much more than your afterlife did. But I think we'll talk about that in more detail when we talk about Gilgamesh, because there's sort of a lengthy portion of Gilgamesh that deals with death and with the underworld. We're not really getting into too much of that with the Enuma Elish, right? The idea here, yeah, is the establishment of civilization and of sort of civilized practices and hierarchy and division. So, what's the purpose of human beings in the Enuma Elish scheme of things? Yeah, worship is part of it, right? Yeah. If you look on page 36, whoever's that is, if you could please turn it off. I shall create humankind. They shall bear the gods' burden, that those may rest, right? So human beings are specifically created to be a kind of subordinate creature, right? They are lesser beings whose function is to do things the gods don't feel like doing anymore, right? So the gods have gone on and built the world, so it's now going to be the job of human beings to maintain that world so the gods don't have to. So essentially, like, we are created to be divine maintenance workers. Right? We're all custodians.
We're terrible.
Yeah, we're not doing so hot. That's one thing that cosmogonic myths usually include, is, right, some explanation of how human beings fit into the grand scheme of things, right? It's not just about making the world, it's about making our place in it. Now, if we compare this to the Greek creation myth that we read, if we look at Hesiod and Theogony, did you notice any particular similarities between Theogony and the Enuma Elish? Where do they seem to match up, if at all?
With the muses.
Okay, yeah. This starts with the muses, right? What are the muses?
Like list the names or?
Well, you don't have to list their names, no. Just, yeah, what are they basically?
Zeus's daughters.
Yeah, they're Zeus's daughters. And what principle do they represent?
The arts, the.
They're inspiration.
Yeah, artistic and intellectual inspiration, right? They are the goddesses of what we would now call the arts and sciences, the liberal arts, right? Now, one thing that we see that's different between the Babylonian myth and the Greek myth, right? In Babylonian myth, we rarely have gods that are merely representative of abstract principles. Usually, even if they do have some attachment to an abstract principle, like, say, justice, they're also the god of some sort of natural force, right? The god of justice is also the sun god. In the Greek system, you have gods, goddesses like the muses, who only represent an abstract idea, an abstract principle, right? There is no goddess of epic poetry in the Babylonian system. Now, how do the muses inspire? What do they do to inspire?
Sing, or they whisper in the ear, and
Yep.
dance ear.
They sing, they whisper in the ear, they dance, right? It's this sort of complex, almost like kind of ritual of seduction here, right? I begin my song, page 40, with the Heliconian muses, whose domain is Helicon, the great god-haunted mountain. Their soft feet move in the dance that rings the violet dark spring in the altar of mighty Zeus. They bathe their lithe bodies in the water of Permessos, or of Hippocrene, or of god-haunted Olmeos. On Helicon's peak they join hands in lovely dances, and their pounding feet awaken desire. From there they set out and, veiled in mist, glide through the night and raise enchanting voices to exalt Aegis-bearing Zeus and queenly hair, and then list of gods, list of gods. It was they who taught Hesiod beautiful song, as he tended his sheep at the foothills of god-haunted Helicon. Here are the words the daughters of Aegis-bearing Zeus, the muses of Olympus, first spoke to me. Listen, you country bumpkins, you pot-bellied blockheads. We know how to tell many lies that pass for truth. And when we wish, we know to tell the truth itself. So what is it that draws a potential poet like Hesiod to the muses in the way they're depicted here?
They didn't want to tell lies. That they were just going to tell them the truth.
Okay, well, they're capable of lying and telling the truth, right? We can do either when we wish, they say, right? But the way he describes the muses before they come up and talk to him, they're actually kind of insulting when they come up and talk to him, right? It's like, you stupid hick, right?
Well, they're
Like their,
attractive females dancing around there.
their
Yeah.
physical attraction.
Yeah, exactly. They awaken desire, right? So inspiration, artistic inspiration, is here framed as arising from sexual desire. And it might be interesting there to note, who's the last goddess we see? Which goddess is born at the very end of the excerpt we've got here? Yeah, Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, is the end result of much of what we get here. And indeed, sort of like more so than what we saw in the Babylonian myth, how does the sort of the generation of various gods and godly beings proceed here?
They killed the one's daughter.
Yeah, there's always killing of the older generation, right? That seems to be a more or less constant. Right, we have that in the Enuma Elish, right? The younger generation of gods kills the beings who were present at the birth of creation, right? And then takes over and rules it. We have something similar going on here, right? Where we have, Kronos subdues Oranos, and Kronos himself will be subdued by his sons, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, who will then divide the world between them, right? Sky, earth, underworld. And if we look at page 42, after we get all of this effusive praise of the muses and how great the muses are, however insulting they may be, right, around line 105 here, right? Sing the glories of the holy gods to whom death never comes, the gods born of Gaia and starry Uranus, and those whom dark night bore, or briny Pontos fostered. Speak first of how the gods and the earth came into being, and of how the rivers, the boundless sea with its raging swell, the glittering stars, and the wide sky above were created. Tell of the gods born of them, the givers of blessings, how they divided wealth, and each was given his realm, and how they first gained possession of many-folded Olympos. Tell me, O muses who dwell on Olympos, and observe proper order for each thing as it first came into being. Chaos was born first, and after it came Gaia the broad-breasted, the firm seat of all the immortals, who hold the peaks of snowy Olympos, and the misty Tartaros, in the depths of broad-pathed earth. And Eros, the fairest of the deathless gods, he unstrings the limbs and subdues both mind and sensible thought in the breasts of all gods and men. So we have three principles that spring forth without any sort of creative act here, right? We start with chaos, and in the Greek sense, chaos does not mean what it means to us. Chaos for the Greeks is a void or nothingness. So in the beginning, there is nothing. Nothing is the first thing that exists. Does that make any sense to you? Yeah, it shouldn't. All right. The next being to be born is Gaia, right? The physical earth. So when you hear people talking about Mother Earth, right? Framing, sort of the earth as female, this is a big part of where that comes from, right? The idea of the physical earth as a goddess or a sort of primordial being. And the third thing to be born, Eros, who is not the god of sexual desire, but is sexual desire itself. That's one thing we have to note about like what these earliest generation of Greek gods are sometimes called primordials because they're not gods of a particular principle, right? They're not gods that represent, they're thought of as actually being that thing or being that principle. Does that make sense? So Eros isn't a god that symbolizes sex. He is sex itself. Gaia isn't a goddess that symbolizes Earth. She is Earth itself, right?
So they weren't
Anthropomorphized? No, not really. So we're running out of time, so we'll sort of wrap this up, right? The remaining generations of gods, right, the Titans and the gods that come after them, are born from the coupling of earth and sky, right? Uranus is, again, not the god of the sky, but the actual sky. And in order for new generations of powerful and destructive beings to stop being born, earth and sky have to be physically separated. You will often find this in a culture's creation myths, right? Something has to happen to stop, or like earth and sky are pictured as a couple having sex who have to be pushed apart so that the earth does not get overcrowded with beings. In the Egyptian creation myth, for example, the sky is female. The sky is a goddess called Nut. The earth is a god called Geb. And another god, the god of the moist air called Shu, actually has to step in and physically lift Nut off of Geb and holds them apart forever. Right now, this is rather more violent. Right, the next generation of gods, led by Kronos, the youngest of them, actually physically cuts his father out of his mother, right? He castrates his father when he comes in the night, and throws the genitals off into the sea, and they then become Aphrodite, right? Aphrodite is born from that. All right, so I just wanted you to get some sense of how myth tends to operate and how myth often involves broadly similar patterns occurring across cultures, even cultures that have no direct relationship with each other. And I want you to sort of keep some of this stuff in mind when you're looking at Gilgamesh next week. I do also have some reading questions for you to help you out if Gilgamesh is something you find the slightest bit confusing, which you very well might. So let me just quickly get those loaded up. I'll put them on the screen up here, and then you can go. Write them down, photograph them, do whatever you have to do. And we'll see those of you who weren't thoroughly sickened by this on Monday.